welcome to another edition of Fair, Clear and Not Misleading.
Good morning, Gareth.
Good morning, Wayne. The podcast where we discuss things that are fair, clear and not misleading. Be they financial promotions, running a business, or anything that our brains come up with.
Not so much a podcast as a stream of consciousness, I think.
Our therapy.
Yes, exactly.
So welcome to our therapy session. This is episode, I think, 11.
Mm-hmm.
And exciting news.
What did we get this week, Gareth?
Apart from a stinking cold, we got authorised, didn't we, Wayne?
We did, yeah. Excellent news. FCA approval authorisation for Section 21 financial promotion approver.
The second firm to get that?
I believe so, or certainly the second one that we've heard about, the second one to announce it. So, yeah, not many there, and a fairly lengthy process, understandably, given what it is that we're doing, and it's a new regime for the regulator, never mind for us, but that was 12 months of questions and interrogations so far, done and complete.
Yeah, and so shall we, well, firstly celebrate, and then
good news.
Secondly, just, I suppose, dissect the process a little bit for anyone who's mentally enough to try and go through it.
Yeah, and I guess this isn't just specific to the Gateway 21 applications either, because it sort of looked and felt in most cases like a lot of FCA applications for firm authorization. It's not dissimilar, different questions, clearly different information being given back, but certainly familiar process, if not on the specifics.
It's funny, right? Because it's basically a registration process. You're basically saying, look, we're authorized, we want to do this thing. We just need to basically tell you, and then you're going to kind of assess whether we're good enough to do it or not, ultimately. And registration processes tend to be quite straightforward. Submit a form, answer some questions. But there's a difference here, right? And that difference is our job is almost gatekeeper for the UK market. And I take that very seriously, but like, if you are not authorized in the UK and you want to promote here and you want to access that market, you can do through us. And the only thing the FCA, or the main thing the FCA are worried about, is how much are you going to be like swayed by, players who shouldn't be allowed access to the market, that they don't have the sort of direct power to come and swipe away if firms are doing it kind of legally through the registration, or the appointment of a financial promotion approver like us. So yeah, you could see there's a lot of fear that we would do something wrong, or we bring the wrong players in, disrupt the market in the UK, people trying to do it properly and legitimately, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and I guess just to go back a step, just to clarify a point really. So we were able to do the financial promotion approvals anyway by virtue of the fact that there was a transitional provision in place. So as long as our application had gone in by Feb last year, then we could continue. This now completes, and I guess the authorization process, we're no longer in a transitional period. So just that point to be clear on. But yeah, you're right. It's a registration process. It looked like other applications to be authorized, but the difference here, as you've kind of said there, I guess, is that this is new and it's very different because it's a different activity really that they're looking at to what they've looked at before in this much detail, and it's a different sector of the market, being crypto assets that have never been regulated in any way really, other than MLRs and so on, but in this context never really been regulated. So they were, I guess, rightly cautious, I would say, and also expectedly rigorous in their assessment of us as a business and people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there's a lot about people right in there. Like, who are the people that are going to be doing this? And obviously it's worth us saying, like, our service is primarily human driven. It's eyeballs looking at things. It's not AI looking at things, or systems just working behind the scenes and us doing no work and just charging clients for that. So, there's a bit of making sure that the right people are doing the right jobs, and that's true of any authorized firm. But I think, particularly in this context, it's about if it isn't Wayne and Gareth all the time, sat down, bringing clients on board, seeing the FinProms, then who is it?
Yeah, and they they do two things, don't they, when they look at this stuff? They look at the words on the page. So they'll ask you questions and you will reply and it will be written, although we did the odd video, didn't we? Or you did. But then they're also looking at how quickly you reply, who's replying, what do the answers look like. They're learning about the people, I think, or I'm pretty certain that they're looking at the culture, I guess. They talk about culture and behaviors. That's what it looks like, right? Is who are these people, and are they fighting on every point? Are they just disagreeing? Do they look like they're just trying to get the best possible position for clients rather than taking into account what the regs are and what the customers might think or experience and the outcomes and all of that complicated stuff? And that, I think, is important to bear in mind. When you're going through these processes, it's not a tick box exercise. They're not just going down a page going, yeah, they've given me the right words on the paper.
Yeah, and of course, it doesn't stop being that at any point either. Yes, we've been authorized. FCA are still going to have concerns about whether we just rampage off into the sunset now, bringing all and sundry into the UK market. Ultimately, it's about setting those standards and keeping them. There will always be every FinProm that we look at will still get reported. It will still get looked at by someone. The FCA will still write to us if they think that we have misunderstood or misapplied the rules in any context. It is not going to stop now just because we got that stamp on the paper.
Yeah, and I've had this same conversation. It was a few years ago, actually, well, probably quite a lot of years ago, in a different world, but in a contract negotiation, and that contract said that yes, the people we were appointing had to be regulated, but that we also had to DD them and understand them, and if we didn't like them, then we could terminate the contract. And their pushback was that, well, you're not the arbiter of who can and can't be regulated. That's the regulator, and so as long as we're approved, then you shouldn't be able to terminate if you just want to on a whim, was what they said. But clearly, we're not going to do that on a whim, and that's just not the case. If there's been plenty of failings from regulated businesses to prove that, and really getting approval is just like getting a driving license. It proves that you were able to handle a vehicle without crashing it into the curb on the 2 hour slot that you had the test. It does not make you a good driver for the rest of your life, and I think it's very similar to that. It's a point in time assessment. It's a incredibly rigorous one. It's very, very difficult, but that's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So, on that, in all good podcast forms, I'm going to run off screen and come back and award us the trophy for FinProm approval. I'm sure this will be the thumbnail of the episode, but FinProm approval award. Congratulations, Wayne.
Excellent, well done, Gareth.
You can live
Now
there.
now the real fun starts. We get back to the boring day today, right?
Yeah, and so what is going on in the boring day today, Wayne?
I had a really good example yesterday. I thought I'd share for clear, fair, not misleading, for consumer duty, for vulnerable customers, all of that good stuff, and a slightly nuanced example of someone trying to do the right thing and then making a hash of it. To be honest, so as the only person in my family that works in finance or anywhere near it, I'm kind of the go-to person for letters that people don't understand. And sadly, there are quite a lot of those letters that people don't understand. And the one I got yesterday was interesting. So this it's my grandma. She's in her 90s. She's incredibly switched on though, super clever. But she got a phone call from her main high street bank. High street banks are a poor term now. They're not on high streets anymore, are they? But we'll go with it. And they called her and said, we notice you've got surplus cash in your current account earning no interest. Why don't you do something with that? We can help you. And she was happy with that. And she basically was talked through it and ended up with a cash ISA with a 1 year fixed term, 5.5%. So I'm thinking, well done, this bank. You've recognized something and you've helped someone to get a better outcome from their cash. Big tick. A year later, the 1 year fix ends and she gets a letter and it all fell to pieces because this letter says your 5.5% will become 1% or 1.5%. But if you want a better rate, then here's what you can do. And Q, lots of paragraphs about going online, visit this URL or click the QR code. And my poor grandma didn't have a clue what any of this stuff meant. So basically, they were pushing towards online interaction. Bearing in mind they'd called her on the phone to set this up, now the only route available was to go online. So I tried to get her online just for the cash ISA, but another letter turns up that says you have to go online for all your accounts with online banking. You need an app. You go online the web. They sent a letter with a peel-off code with lots of text on it that said criminals will ask you for your details, but we never will. Well, that just killed it because my poor grandma said, I don't want anything to do with this. This is frightening me. I've not been sleeping. It's been on my mind. Let's just leave the money. 1.5% is better than nothing. And so the outcome there is someone who's not online was, let's say, sold a product, which was the right one for her given the circumstances, but is now unable to access the better rate again and has it trapped in a low-paying cash ISA because she doesn't want to go online. The only way she could do it is to go online, either by asking someone else, me, to do it. The bank doesn't know who I am or whether I'm a good person or a bad person, or to get her to try and work it out for herself, which just puts her at massive risk because now she's knows enough to get online, but then is exposed to these criminals they were talking about. And I thought that was quite a good example of being, it's not necessarily unclear, unfair, or misleading what they've said, although it would have been nice to know at the outset that you'll have to go online next in order to continue to get any decent rate. But certainly from looking after customers who've got some kind of vulnerability characteristics and just thinking through that process and what it means, you can see the intent was well-meaning, but the outcome, which is what the FCA are bothered about, certainly was not. And I've got a whole stack of those, so I can bring these examples up in other podcasts. But that one just so fresh, happened last night. I thought that's a good example where firms try and do the right thing, but sometimes doesn't quite pan out that way.
Yeah, and that's super topical, right? Because what we heard last week, maybe consumer duty regs going to start getting cut back. Firms can't cope with the terrible obligation to actually have a duty towards their consumers that treats them in the way that those regulations consider to be appropriate. So obviously this is an example of a firm that's put something in place to try and make that happen. I suppose there's a couple of points here, right? Like you can see what's happened internally. Someone has gone, we need to make sure that this is compliant with the rules and that we're writing and we're saying everything we need to. And so no doubt they appointed a really expensive lawyer to write a letter that was very clear and not misleading. And they just forgot that some people don't actually work in an online environment.
Yeah, and target market, again, this is another good point, right? So there are some, especially in crypto, where you're not buying crypto unless you are online. So in that case, you've obviously got to be careful not to coach people into buying it online when they're not confident they can look after it once they're there and they understand the risks, not just of price volatility, but of scams and data and so on and so forth. But that when you're trying to do the right thing and work out what that looks like, figuring it out in silos within a very, very big business is super difficult because these things don't happen in silos. Once they land on someone's doormat, it's all happening in their room and in their heads. And trying to do it at scale then is hard because everyone's built scale by using processes, but processes don't always pick up the nuance unless someone thinks about it. And then I think the biggest piece here is the disconnect between people of all kinds and the firms and the individuals in the firms that are doing stuff. So if you not are just not, I've never helped a 90-year-old lady deal with her finances in my life until now, and wasn't expecting to. but here I am doing it, and so I have that experience. But a lot of people just won't think of that, and I've heard lots and lots of conferences in industry over the years where people have said, well, if they don't want to read the prospectus, that's their problem. It's not, though, is it really? Because you've probably given them other docs to help them make it feel like they do know what they're talking about when perhaps they don't really. Um, but yeah, it's I understand it's difficult because it's hard to know all of these different nuances and all these different permutations and to how to deal with it and to do that at scale, bearing in mind that you need scale now in a lot of, particularly banking, because if you don't have scale, you can't afford to be regulated because of the cost of it. So you do have empathy with the firms that are in that position, but it's a tough one.
And obviously, it's worth saying for the audience, like we aren't about to become a Martin Lewis consumer hotline champion, but actually these are interesting examples from a firm's perspective to work through. Um, Consumer duty is a regulation, but I think, I know you say this a lot, Wayne, like it's just business 101. You don't have to treat it like a regulation in a way. Your frontline staff just need to be like thinking about your customers and who they are. The number of times firms just think that their target market is everyone is with bonkers, really, because it can't be. Your product is only aimed at certain people in a society, and if it does happen to need to exclude some because it just isn't fit, like if you're trying to force people online with all of your comms, maybe you aren't right for older people, and maybe you shouldn't be targeting them with products, and you should just be targeting an online native audience. Is that ever clear in anyone who tries to open a bank account? Like, do they say, "Are you comfortable using the internet for your service needs?" And if the answer is no, then they say, "Well, sorry, maybe we're not the place for you." That's it, right, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it depends very much on what service you're providing and what market you're in. So I would have a much higher expectation of a large high street bank than I would of more niche um, products and businesses, because high street banks they're massive, right? So don't tell me they can't afford to do this, because that's not true. And they have a massive, very, very broad customer base, and their target market would say that, and so you've got to be able to service those people. So there's a higher expectation there than investments, crypto, ETF, whatever those other products and services are. Firstly, people don't need those products to survive. You need a bank to survive. You can't function without a bank, and so they should make more effort. But exactly as you said, if you're serving a different market, be clear about it, and be clear about who you're not serving, and don't be drawn into that, and then bits of this stuff start to fall away.
And there's two beautiful segues here, Wayne. So we'll take them one at a time. I'm going to bookmark one, and that bookmark is complaints and getting in touch with providers. But the first segue is a segment that I'm going to call Business Idea of the Week. And, what we are, what you could do here. I love this idea. I've tried to think about it and get it off the ground in so many different ways. Is a high street first place where you can go and speak to the people there about any financial product. It's not your own. You don't create your own bank accounts. You don't create your own credit cards. You don't create your own whatever. But you license the ability to access those providers with the providers in the background, and you provide the front office. You provide the space where people on the high street can come and talk to you about their bank account, get information about it, pay in some money, take some money out, do all those things. And we know the post office do that with their service, but nobody likes going in a post office today. Like the queues, the ticket system that you pull the number out, you're behind someone who's trying to send a parcel or return 53 Amazon packages. Just a space where you can do that, I think, is a really like solid way of keeping people integrated into their financial products and their financial life.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It doesn't even need only to be a physical location, then, does it? In a town centre. If I go into the town centre here, notwithstanding the fact it's grim, that you've got to pay for the parking, so now there's a cost associated. That assumes you can drive, or that there's a bus that will get you there and get you back again. or that you can even get out of the house to do that. So like lots of people can't even get out of the house to do those things. So I can sit here now and do exactly what I did yesterday, which is order cat toothpaste and a toothbrush, and a man in a van will appear with it within 24 hours. But someone's getting letters and things sent to them about their financial situation, and they've got nowhere to go, not even a phone number. And that also feels like a little bit of a weird disconnect. Now, appreciating there are skills levels to delivering parcels versus giving, I almost said advice then, and then I was going to say guidance. That's not been established advice guidance yet, so I'm going to say help, explaining what this stuff is and what it means.
Yeah, and of course the risk there is you've got some bloke turning up in a van at some vulnerable person's address. So you've got to be like super on that in that context. But yeah, definitely like an ability to deal more in person with somebody in a way that works, whether that's I'm going to stick a mobile unit that drives around on a schedule in an area and you can catch it, hail it down like a bus and access it that way. But yeah, that's there you go. Business idea of the week. I've called it every bank. You're not allowed to call it every bank because bank is a sensitive term. So yeah, good luck. Okay, segue number 2, Wayne. Complaints. Do you want to lead
Well,
this bit off and then I can jump in?
I'll kick it off and tell you that this bank that I've been dealing with is going to get an absolute stinking letter from me, but with some nice helpful advice in there and lots of references to Consumer Duty. So I hope they're looking forward to receiving that. Yeah, the complaints point is an interesting one, especially in the context of what we're doing, because there will always be complaints, and a complaint is much like the term promotion. There is the sort of world view amongst most people that a promotion involves bright colours and hyperbole and you should buy this, it's amazing language. And we know in the regulated world that isn't the case. Same for complaints. A complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction. And that is suddenly a much lower bar than saying, well, they've not said in their letter, this is a complaint, so I'm just going to put it in the in the bin. It's far lower bar than that.
Yeah, and regulated firms have to deal with complaints in accordance with the rules, right? So you've got to acknowledge the letter, you've got potentially 3 days to resolve it. If you can't resolve it in that time, you've got 8 weeks to resolve it. Firms have these whole processes set up to deal with stuff like that. But there's some nuance around this, right? Because in our context, let's call it, the crypto financial approvals context, a client of one of our clients, so we'll call them a customer of one of our clients, could complain about that client, that firm. But that firm isn't authorized, it's not regulated, it doesn't subscribe to the SUP handbook or the DISP handbook. So it does not have any direct obligations to deal with a complaint in accordance with those requirements. So it can just take them in and process them as almost like average customer service good practice would consider it. Meanwhile, we, as the regulated firm, do have to deal with complaints in that fashion. But those complaints should be about our technically regulated business, although we would, I suppose, consider all bits of our business to be captured by that. So then, a customer might get a different experience depending on whether they complain directly to us and whether they complain directly to the firm. And of course, in our context, we don't deliver that service to that customer. The firm does if it's like, oh, my money, I can't get my money out, or the customer service team aren't responding to my messages. We have no power over any of that, but we still have to treat it like a complaint. So then all we can do is then pass it out to the client, right, and then hope that the client deals with it, and we sort of follow up and monitor that and make sure it's all happening. And so it's created a sort of weird environment, or sort of almost two-tier system. And I don't think there's a great deal of clarity, if I were being truthful, around whose obligations are what and how you get these non-authorized crypto firms to sort of deal with complaints in a way that meets the regulatory requirements. And that's quite important in a way, because there's some confusion there, and obviously there's the whole point that clients, because they're not authorized firms, but clients of ours take those kind of downstream like consumer duty requirements that we sort of have to apply, again, to talk about like treating customers fairly and meeting the consumer duty. And so yeah, it's an interesting space, and so I think there's going to be a bit of a shift, I would say, if I were looking at the horizon, for the FCA to say, actually, we do expect crypto firms to be meeting the standards that we've set for our regulated firms in handling those complaints. And I think that will be quite a challenge because, as we know, how many different ways are there to express dissatisfaction about a crypto firm? Reddit, Twitter, like all those forums where you can just use your mouthpiece in a void and hope someone picks it up if you shout loudly enough.
So I think there's you're right. There's the strict interpretation of the rules as written. That's kind of your first piece that we look at, isn't it? So yeah, we have to of course deal with complaints as a regulated firm under SUP and DISP, but the complaints that we deal with in that context are the ones that are about the activity we've undertaken, which is the financial promotions that we're approving. Now, when it gets, we've not actually had those yet, and hopefully wouldn't, but if we do, so be it, we'll deal with it. But when you get something about the service which is further downstream, and we want to hear about those from our clients, from the firms, you've now got that information. So strictly speaking, that information, those complaints do not fall within the rules as applied to us. But that doesn't mean we can pretend we haven't seen it, because as you say, we still have this broader obligation, the principles to meet, which is consumer duty and treating customers fairly, etc. So we have to be mindful of it, aware of it. Does it have any knock-on? Does it mean that this firm's not acting properly at all? And try to make some judgments. And that kind of happens, I think, a lot in regulation here. And I think that's where a lot of firms struggle, particularly to the earlier point about when they're trying to do this at scale. So it's fine when we can sort of sit down and think about this and philosophize and assess the numbers and say, well, this might be a problem, but did they get hold of you easily enough? Is that why they were doing this route rather than what would be a common route? Let's put an email address on there, etc. We can find a good outcome, rather than just it's not ours. Let's get rid. And so with a lot of rules like this, you've got to meet the strict interpretation. Of course, everybody has to do that. Where it isn't super prescribed, you've got to make a judgment and do it in the correct spirit and know what you want the end result to be. And you come to your conclusion, and you aren't necessarily going to know if that's what the regulator was expecting or not. But you did your piece. You did what you thought was the right thing to do, and you evidence that. And so if there's any feedback on it, then you can be collaborative rather than fighting and protective and etc.
Yeah, and actually, there's a lesson in here for those crypto firms, maybe who are our clients, some of whom aren't, but who are going through the registration process to be a crypto asset money laundering firm. That is something that will fundamentally change in terms of your processes, right? Which is you'll become, authorized by the FCA with that direct ability for them to say, well, that's a complaint about your regulated crypto business. So, you're going to have to deal with that in a way that's actually in line with this set of rules, and that will change probably how firms actually deal with complaints. So it is one factor to think about in terms of, do we want to set up shop here? Do we not want to set up shop here? I would say probably fundamentally the outcome should end up being the same, that you should treat customer complaints in that broadest sense of expressions of dissatisfaction properly and prudently, and you should tell people what the outcome of their complaint is, always making it clear that there's no recourse to the FOS or the FSCS because it's not that kind of regulated activity. We've had complaints received, or at least we've received complaints that had been passed to clients. I've contacted the FOS, the FSCS, the Better Business Bureau to make these complaints, and actually that's the key message in a lot of this, isn't it? Is you aren't protected by any of those things if you buy crypto. That's message number one almost. That's the risk warning, you aren't protected. So the onus really is there on the firms to treat these complaints properly.
And like we talk about with Consumer Duty, and as you say, that's been sort of put under the spotlight a bit. Potentially, it's got its head under the guillotine, maybe, given some of the stuff that's come out of government recently. But if you look at what it's trying to do, and then you think about complaints in that same context, think about it as just business practice. If you're getting lots of people complaining about what you do, and there are trends there, and that's often what the regulator's looking for, is trends. It's not every individual complaint results in an investigation from them. It's trends. There's a trend there. Surely you want that to end, right? Because that's not going to give you good sustainable business. You're going to have annoyed customers and poor reviews, and everybody knows that. It's super transparent now. That's going to be seen really easily. And the same with the other stuff. If you're selling people stuff that they don't need, shouldn't have, is too expensive, etc., you're not going to sell to them again. So what are you here for? Are you not here to serve people long term because that's more valuable than the fast wool over the eyes model, to use an extreme example?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. And so, yeah, no doubt there is some high street bank out there that are about to receive a expression of dissatisfaction from a middle-aged man on behalf of his grandma. And
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be one of the ones that you get very infrequently as a regulated person. You think, oh no, it's one of these. I will be that person. But no, I'm not. Not going to be nasty or unreasonable, of course. But I think it's helpful to point these things out to them.
mhm, agreed. And that, I think, I don't have anything else this week, Wayne. Do you have anything else you want to share with anybody watching?
No, nothing new. I think we rock on and continue to completely wing what we talk about in the podcasts
Love it.
within the bounds of financial promotions and running a business, and
Being
just see
fair,
where it
clear,
takes
and
us
not misleading
in
in all
all in,
aspects.
in all of life. Yes.
All of life. Good. Well, thank you again, Wayne, for your thoughts this week.
Thank you. Thank you, Gareth.
We'll no doubt reconvene.
Till next time.